So brand's quite a big deal, and I gather that most of you understand that given you've come along today. But why it matters, what it is, what we can do about it, these are all good questions, and I'm not going to answer any of them because we've got Fran here today from Z, and she is much more qualified to do that. So, Fran is their Retail Product Marketing Manager and was at Z when Z was transformed from Shell. How many years ago was that?
Almost 5.
5 years ago. Well, as I like to put it, when Shell came, I'm going to keep it all around. Z came out of its shell. Shell came out of its Z, yeah. So I won't stand around any longer. I'm going to let Fran talk, and I would like to say that not only is she qualified to speak at brand, she's qualified to speak full stop. And she told me not to say this. But Fran won a public speaking competition and was in Las Vegas earlier this year. So, no pressure.
Thanks. I did ask Gail not to say that because this is the first presentation I've done since then, and I am feeling quite a lot of pressure as a result, but that's okay. You guys look like a friendly audience. So before I get started, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about me. So as Gail said, I'm the Retail Product Marketing Manager at Z Energy. That means that I manage the branding, marketing and communications for our retail products, so the likes of Z Express and ZX. I started working back at Z 5 years ago when it was still Shell being operated by Greenstone Energy. Little did I know when I came on board that it was about to undergo one of the biggest rebrands in New Zealand's recent history, so it was a bit of a surprise, but a good one. Before I came to Z, I worked at L'Oreal in the luxury products division, where I did the product management for global brands like Giorgio Armani fragrances and Lancôme. I have to admit right at the start that I haven't done any marketing for not-for-profits, but I have supported my sister with the marketing of her small business, Sweet Bakery and Cakery, you can see up there. And I actually think that small businesses face a lot of similar challenges to not-for-profits, namely a lack of money and time. When I'm not working, you'll find me hanging out with our new puppy, Lola, that's her up there, eating brunch and travelling and exploring new places. Cool. So there are 3 main topics I'm going to cover today. Those are what brand is, why brand matters, and how to go about developing and strengthening your brand. I'm not just going to talk about what you need to do, I'm also going to give you some tools and techniques to make that practical and allow you to take some things away with you. So firstly, what brand is, or just as importantly, what it isn't. The invite might have given this away, but brand isn't just a logo. And it's not just colours or fonts either. So what is a brand then? There are many different definitions out there, but one of my favourites is this by Marty Neumer. A brand is simply a person's gut feeling about a product, service or organisation. In other words, it's not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. And that gut feel is influenced by every interaction they have with your brand. It's not just influenced by the TV ad, if you happen to do TV ads, or posters they see, or even the emails that they receive from your database. It's the greeting that they get when they call your helpline, and it's the thank you they get from a volunteer who's shaking a bucket on the street. It's even influenced by the casual interactions that they have with people who work with your brand. So, conversations at a barbecue, that kind of thing. The reason why influence and gut feel is important is that we humans aren't as rational as we like to think we are. The limbic part of the brain that controls emotion also controls decision making. You could tell people all of the reasons in the world why they should support your charity, but if they don't connect with your brand, the chances are they won't. I think this quote by Simon Sinek sums it up perfectly. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Although that quote talks about buying, I think it's equally as relevant for donations. Our family supports KidsCan through a monthly donation, and I'm the one who chose that charity. When I was preparing for this, I asked myself why I chose KidsCan, and it was definitely because they created an emotional connection with me. I completely bought into their why, which is to enable disadvantaged New Zealand children to reach their potential. My husband reminded me that I said at the time, it doesn't seem fair that some children don't even have the basics they need to be able to learn. So that's at the heart of their why, right? They really connected with me. In addition to creating an emotional connection, branding is really important for not-for-profits for two other kind of key reasons. Firstly, I think it shows you're credible and that people can trust you with their donations. Most people would be reluctant to donate more than a couple of dollars to an organisation who doesn't have a professional-looking brand because they probably wouldn't have confidence that that money was going to go where you said it was going to go. It also motivates staff and volunteers to do their best work and go the extra mile. This is important in all organisations, but I think it's particularly important in not-for-profits when you've got volunteers who aren't being paid for their time. They obviously have a connection with the cause, otherwise they wouldn't have joined you in the first place, but a strong brand can make this even more powerful and also keep it alive as time goes on. So, we've identified that brand is all about gut feel, and we know it's important to influence it. But how do you go about doing that? Because there's quite a lot to cover in this section, I'm going to break it down into 3 key areas. Firstly, brand strategy. Secondly, brand identity. And thirdly, brand integration. Because you're all at different stages on the brand development journey, some of you will have a few of these things nailed already. Others will have most, if not all of them, but hopefully even if you do, this will serve as a reminder of why this is important and a bit of a kind of refresher, keeping it present. Now, first up under brand strategy is know your why. Since people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The first and most critical element of building a brand is being really clear about why you exist. Your purpose, cause, or belief. That sounds like common sense, but so many organisations get really focused on what they do and how they do it, and they forget about the why they exist in the first place. Because cause is at the heart of not-for-profits, you guys have a bit of a head start on this one, I think. In addition to knowing why you exist, you need to work out what differentiates you, or in other words, what makes you unique or different from your competitors. For example, if there are several not-for-profit operations in your area which provide services for homeless people, why should donors who want to support homelessness choose to support your service? And why should the homeless who need support come to you? If you're not clear about what differentiates you, there are several things you can do to help you with this. Firstly, you can think about why you joined your not-for-profit in the first place. So there are heaps of worthy causes out there. Assuming you weren't the founder of it, why did you choose this one? You could also ask your volunteers or donors why they support you instead of another not-for-profit. By the time you've completed this exercise, you should be able to answer this question. Our not-for-profit is the only that. Why don't you have a go at answering this now with the person next to you? down. I was waiting for it to quieten down, but it just got noisier, so I'm not sure if you've drifted off the topic. Does anyone want to share back with the room where they got to? Anyone?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I'm the vice chair of WellMe. We look after and offer support for those with chronic fatigue syndrome, Steer's conditions, and ME. So our not-for-profit is the only support group organisation in the Wellington region who offers support for chronically unwell people.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've got a pretty clear differentiator there then. Anyone else? Cool.
I'm the manager of the Wellington Women's Boarding House, and our not-for-profit is the only boarding house in New Zealand that works specifically with homeless women.
Cool. Again, a really clear differentiation, so it's really cool. Is there anyone else who found this a little bit more challenging, who perhaps has a lot of competitors that are in a similar space but still managed to find something that really differentiates them?
Oh, we're at Wellington Play Centre Association and lots and lots of ECEs offering child education, but Play Centre is the only ECE where parents are actively involved in their children's education.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's the important thing about this. It doesn't have to be like, there might be organisations that do similar things to what you do, but it's how you do it differently to those organisations and what you're going to really pick and shout about. Awesome. Okay. So next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about values. How many of your organisations have a set of values? Cool, okay, so probably about half the room, would that be fair to say? Some of you are a little bit unsure, so this might be useful for you anyway. I guess if you're one of the organisations that didn't put up your hand, then I'd strongly recommend developing a set of values. A strong set of values will guide everything that people in your organisation do, through from making a big decision to answering the phone. And if you don't have values but you want to develop some, here are some tips for how to go about it. So first of all, if you want your values to be something that employees do, then they need to start with a verb. That way people can ask themselves, am I doing this? 2, keep them short and sweet to ensure they're easy to remember. 3, avoid corporate buzzwords and use everyday language with a bit of personality. I think using corporate buzzwords is the quickest way to ensure that your values end up sitting in a binder on a shelf and not getting used. And 4 is don't have too many. 4 or 5 maximum is enough. You don't need 10 values, otherwise everybody will just get really confused and I think they'll lose the reason for being. To ensure you get buy-in from your staff and volunteers, then I'd strongly recommend involving them in the development of your values if you can. If this isn't practical, then you need to think about how you launch them in a way that will make them really feel like they've been involved in the development. And either way, you definitely need to have a plan for keeping them alive. So you might do this by talking about them at the start of all of your staff and volunteer meetings. You might explain them to new staff when they come on board, and you might reward your staff and volunteers for demonstrating the values. That's a really nice way to kind of make sure that they're being lived in your organisation. So these are Zed's values here. I'm just going to not look at the slide and share them. So we've got share everything, have the passion, be bold, be straight up, and back people. They're absolutely everywhere at Zed. I've actually never been in an organisation, well, obviously L'Oreal was very different, but L'Oreal, we didn't even have values. At Zed, that just lived and breathed. Yeah, you guys are probably like, yeah, that's not that surprising. But, you know, petrol company, right? We have really strong ones. So they're part of our newbie induction. They're on the walls of our offices as a daily reminder. They're part of our 360-degree feedback process. So when people get feedback from their peers, they're asked to be measured against the values, and people are also recognised for demonstrating them at our annual Heroes Awards. So every year we pick one person as the person who, well actually other people nominate and one person is picked as the overall person who best demonstrated that value. So they're very much alive, and I think a day doesn't go by when you don't hear them being referred to in a casual conversation or in a meeting. They definitely guide the decisions people make, including myself, and the way we behave. So very cool. I also found Wellington Zoo's ones online. I'm not going to read you all the copy underneath, but I thought these were a really nice example from a not-for-profit. They're a little bit wordy, on the wordy side, but I think they've got stacks of personality and they obviously align really closely with their brand. So we have a strong, furry green heart. We punch above our weight. We're a voice to be heard, and welcome to our wild party. I think those are really kind of fun ones that I could see staff getting really engaged with. So the next step is developing personality. I think brands are a bit like people. They need to have a personality. And your brand personality definitely needs to be aligned with your values. They can't be in conflict. For example, if one of your brand values is to be ruthless, not that I've heard of anywhere where it is, but it was a good example, and one of your personality traits is compassionate, then those are really at odds, so you need to make sure they line up. Again, just thought I'd share with you Zed's brand personality traits. So you can see that they align really closely with our values. For example, have the passion is one of our values, and fun-loving is one of the ways that that comes through in our personality. The last thing I'm going to cover under brand strategy is getting to know your audience. Unless you do this, it's really hard to develop communications which will influence their gut feeling. And I mean really get to know them. Don't just get to know their demographics, like their age or their income bracket. Get to know, their likes and their dislikes and the kind of things they do on the weekend. One way you can really kind of bring this to life once you've done it is develop personas. That really helps make them real for your staff and volunteers. You might even choose to give them a name. So again, just because it's really close to my heart, but as an example of one of our segments. So this is Simon and Sarah Professionals, our biggest retail segment. We actually identified ours through a piece of research that we did when we rebranded to Zed, but there's no need for it to be that complicated. You might just start talking to your staff and your volunteers and the members of your community and go from there. So once you've developed your brand strategy, it's time to get started on your visual identity, or the fun stuff, as I like to call it. So the two things I'm going to talk about within visual identity are your look and feel and tools. Look and feel is probably what most people traditionally think of as your brand. So things like your logo, colours, fonts, imagery, and even your tone of voice. Although I've been at pains to point out these aren't the only thing brand is about, they are an important component of your brand because they help people recognise it and how it comes to life. One of the most important things to remember about your look and feel is to ensure it's consistent. That's also one of the biggest challenges. So a quick and dirty way to check this is to print out everything that you've produced over the last 6 months and spread them all out on a table. I'm not just talking about printed materials like brochures, I'm talking about every piece of communication from your organisation. So it could be things like emails, funding applications, social media posts, everything you've produced. And then ask yourself, really challenge yourself, do they look like they all come from the same organisation? You can go one step further and do the hand test. Cover up your logo and see if they still look like they come from the same organisation. If they don't, then I guess that's both a bit of a concern but also an opportunity, because you've got an opportunity to make them a lot more consistent. And one of the main tools you can develop to ensure a consistent look and feel is a set of brand guidelines or style guide. So the ones on the screen are from Macmillan, which is a cancer support service in the UK, if you haven't heard of it. And the reason I like these is because they are really simple. I think brand guidelines don't need to be complicated, and in fact they're probably a lot more likely to get used if they're not. People probably have a tendency to think brand guidelines need to be, a 20-page, 30-page document, but it could be as simple as just putting everything you know on a page or 2 pages, and they're probably a lot more likely to get used that way. If you don't have brand guidelines and you want to develop some, these are the key things that I would make sure that you include. So firstly is your logo, obviously. So how you want your logo to be used. Things like what the smallest size you want it to appear at is and how much clear space you want it to have around it. You might have more than one version of your logo, so it's also important to tell people which version they should be using and when. What your colours are. So things like you need to include things like your RGB, CMYK and also PMS references, so that when people are printing your brand material, they make sure that the colours come out the way they should. What your brand font or fonts are. Again, if you've got more than one brand font, then make sure you tell people when to use which one. A lot of companies have a brand font which is used in all of their official company produced materials, and then they have another one which is more commonly available that's used by staff and volunteers, so make sure you be really clear about that. What type of imagery your brand uses. So do you use illustration or photography, or is it more of a mix of both? Is there a particular style of illustration that you use, and what type of photography do you prefer? For example, you might want photography that doesn't look too cheesy, so you might say as a rule that you don't want photos where anyone's looking directly at the camera. Or you may say that all your photos need to be taken in New Zealand, not overseas, or that you want them to be using real people, not models, so that kind of thing. Earlier we talked about your brand personality, so obviously once you've identified that, you want to make sure that you include that in your brand guidelines, so that when people are developing a piece of communication on behalf of your brand, it really sounds like you, and that also ties in really closely to tone of voice. So when people are writing a communication from your brand, what tone do you want them to use? Is it down to earth and conversational, or more formal? Should they sign off an email with cheers, or yours sincerely, or somewhere in the middle? All those sorts of things matter, because if saying you've got a really down-to-earth and fun-loving brand, and then everybody's signing off the email with yours sincerely, or that sort of thing that's very formal and traditional, it just creates a bit of an inconsistency. So the other tools you should consider developing are templates. So along with brand guidelines, templates make it really easy for your staff and volunteers to deliver a consistent brand experience. So in terms of what to develop, I think really think about the main ways that your staff and volunteers communicate, and then provide them with the templates that they need to do this. So things like Word documents, PowerPoints, even email templates. And I think the key with these is ensuring that you keep them somewhere where people can easily access them, otherwise they won't get used. So I've had a couple of experiences with companies keeping them on their website, on like a private login only section of their website, and that's a really good, easy way to kind of keep them in a place that volunteers can easily access them, I think. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is probably both one of the most important and also the trickiest, and that's integrating your brand into your organisation. So as I mentioned at the start, I think people's perception of your brand is influenced by every interaction they have with it. So from the official materials you produce, like a TV ad or a poster or a brochure, through to the emails your staff and your volunteers send out, and the way in which they answer the phone. So there's no point you doing an amazing ad campaign which really emotionally connects with a donor and brings them to your brand for them to call up and have an awful experience speaking to someone on the phone that's completely inconsistent with that. In short, I think there's a really commonly held misconception that brand belongs with marketing, and I'd like to bust that. I think that all your staff and your volunteers need to be your brand ambassadors. One of the advantages I think you've got with volunteers compared to, say, service station staff is that they're already really passionate about your cause. They obviously believe in it, otherwise they wouldn't have joined you in the first place, 90% of the time. So what they're probably missing is the understanding of why it's important and what their role in it is. So if you do training to take them through that, then I think you'll find you'll really hit the nail on the head there. So to summarise what I've told you today in a nutshell, I think brand is obviously more than just a logo, colours or fonts. It's a person's gut feel about you. Because humans don't make decisions for rational reasons, it's essential that you influence that gut feel. And you can do this by getting really clear about your brand strategy, developing a consistent visual identity, and training your staff and volunteers to be your biggest brand ambassadors.